Police Commissioner James O'Neill is at police headquarters holding the annual pre-Passover briefing. He's expected to talk about what security measures will take place during Passover celebrations. Right now, a rabbi is introducing him. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Prophets raged at the improprieties of their era, and out of their passion came the ethical and moral principles of the great faiths of the Western world. Abraham Lincoln's fierce opposition to slavery was born out of anger when he stood at a slave auction one day and he saw a woman being forcibly wrenched away from her husband and her son. He shouted, "This is wrong, and if I ever get the chance to hit it, I'm going to hit it hard." Martin Luther King was angry at the disparity between the promise of America and the reality. But he knew that Americans could and would be better if he could only awaken their consciences and their better nature. All of us in the Jewish community are very grateful to Commissioner O'Neill because he's angry at the recrudescence of anti-Semitism. He's angry that the Anti-Defamation League has had to compile statistics that show a sharp uptick in anti-Jewish incidents over the past year. He's angry at the threats against Jewish houses of worship. He's angry at the vandalism at Jewish cemeteries and other sacred sites. And he is angry at the assaults upon Jewish citizens for no other reason than they're Jewish. And as I'm sure he's going to make clear this morning, as he's made clear to me and to so many other Jewish audiences on so many different occasions, he's making all of the resources of this department available to make sure that the Jews of this city are safe and secure, and that all of us will be able to observe the coming Passover holiday without any fear or anxiety. You know, it's hard to believe that after so many thousands of years, anti-Semitism is alive and well. The Jews of this country have done very nicely, but recent events have awakened age-old anxieties. History has taught us that you can live the best life possible and still feel that you're on the edge of a precipice. The freedom that we Jews seek on Passover, we really seek for all people. And when we eat at the Passover Seder that bitter vegetable, we know it reminds us of bitterness, but at the same time, the maror has to be dipped into a sweet substance called charoset, made out of the apple and nuts and wine, and it signifies our faith that notwithstanding the pain, the sorrow, and the anguish of the present, there will be sweetness. Commissioner O'Neill, all of us in the Jewish community are so grateful to you for your fervor, your determination, and your skill in dipping the maror into the charoset. It's really part of your determination that every citizen of this city, regardless of race, religion, color, and creed, will be able to be true to his religious convictions without anxiety. Thank God we live in a city where the Jew, the Catholic, the Protestant, the Muslim, the Hindu, the Shintoist, the Buddhist, the Sikh, the Confucianist, and what have you, who is faithful to his religious teachings and respectful of the religion of others, is regarded as the most devoted and loyal of citizens. You know, there's a story about a man who was stranded in the desert, dying of thirst. Suddenly a genie appeared and he gave him 3 wishes. For the first, he asked for water, and it was given. And then he asked for companionship, and he got that as well. For the third, he asked that all the Jews be killed. The genie proceeded to put the man back in the desert, dying of thirst. "What'd you do that for?" the man cried out. And the reply came back, "To teach you a lesson. You never know when you're going to run into a Jewish genie." Well, Commissioner O'Neill is not Jewish, but he can do more for the Jews of this city than any genie. The freedom of Passover is the heritage of all people. When anyone is denied liberty, we're all denied liberty. And our observance of Passover will be successful if it brings all of us closer together. That is the uniqueness of our culture. The late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan said that it is not politics, but culture that determines the success of a society. Thank God we have in this department a culture of mutual caring and responsibility. The role of the Jews in the world is the very same. We regard ourselves as a people who are desirous of augmenting the liberty of all citizens in this, the most magnificent nation in the entire world. I don't think that there is any enterprise which is more noble than the enterprise in which we are presently engaged, especially at this time when the nation is so bitterly divided in an acrid manner between the various groups in our midst. Groups are pitted against groups, not only in a competition for jobs and spoils, but for the very right to define America. People with whom we disagree are too often treated not only with incivility and intolerance, but even worse, contempt, as if they were utterly worthless. You know, the Passover story tells us that Moses never entered the promised land. I think that's a metaphor for the fact that no one ever enters the promised land. No problems are ever solved totally and finally. But we're convinced that this august gathering, made up of the most distinguished leaders of New York City's Jewish community and the brass of the NYPD, under the leadership of Commissioner O'Neill, can do so much that can help to make the issues of our society better than they were. So then, maybe our prayer ought not to be the prayer of that little boy. Maybe it's a good thing if we are touched by what Shakespeare called noble anger. Aristotle said that anger can be constructively channeled if you're angry at the right person, at the right time, in the right way, in the right place, and to the right extent. May all of us be moved by that noble discontent of which it has been said that it is not only the path to heaven, but it is the best way to walk the earth. A very happy Easter, and to quote Commissioner Ganley, a Zisem Pesach to you all.
And thank you so much, Rabbi Cass. It's always a blessing to have your spiritual guidance preside over our briefings. It's indeed my pride and pleasure to introduce the police commissioner and head genie, as Rabbi Cass just mentioned, of the City of New York, the Honorable James P. O'Neill.
Morning. I've been called a lot of things. I don't think I've ever been called a genie before. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for today, and thank you for what you do for the police department and the city each and every day. It's so important. It's great to see everybody here, and thank you for those accolades, Rabbi. But it's so much more than one person. It's 54,000 people that do this work each and every day, especially the men and women wearing that blue uniform that go out there, and they know what their mission is. Their mission is to keep the city safe, and no one does it better. So thank you for that, and from my heart to all the people, all the men and women wearing that blue uniform today, thank you for what you do each and every day, and thank you for making this the safest city in the United States. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to One Police Plaza, the NYPD's 40th annual pre-Passover briefing. Can't believe it's 40 years. New York City certainly has changed a lot in the past 40 years, and I think everybody would agree with that. And much of this is because of the hard work of the members of the NYPD who have built trust and forged relationships in our neighborhoods all across New York City. And today's gathering is a great example of how those relationships can grow to benefit this great city. And I'm proud to welcome you back here as we prepare for another safe and successful Passover season. Passover celebrates family and friends, gives tribute to freedom, and honors the sacrifices made to earn that freedom. It's an ancient ritual, but one that must be continuously renewed. The members of the NYPD understand that very well. We know that living in a free and safe community requires a daily commitment by both the police and the people that we serve. It's our job to protect you and to make you feel safe, and it's your job to work with us as we adapt and respond to anyone and anything that threatens our communities. It's not easy, but it gets done far more effectively when we do it together, and we certainly do that. Those of you here today understand that, and we've been collaborating on this effort for 40 years now. We're very proud of what we've accomplished over that time, but it's clear that we have much more work to do. The hate crime statistics for the first 3 months of 2019 are troubling. We've seen spikes in anti-Semitic crime and in hate crimes overall citywide. We certainly won't hide from this. It only strengthens our resolve to combat any and all form of bias, prejudice, and hate. But we need your help. I applaud all of those who have come forward to report any of these intolerable acts, because it's a vital step. It's the first vital step in a thorough and extensive process towards justice. We take all reported incidents of bias extremely seriously, and thankfully, we have the best hate crime task force in the country, working 24 hours a day with our precinct cops, detective squads, clergy leaders, and more. Remember, this isn't a time for fear, it's a time for vigilance. It's vital that you keep an open dialogue with us here at the NYPD. We've gone to even greater lengths to make that easier than ever for all New Yorkers. I hope that you speak very often with your precinct community affairs officers and to our Community Affairs Bureau here at headquarters. For decades, these cops have been vital links between the police department and the neighborhoods we serve. And over the last several years, we are strengthening those links. We now have NCOs, neighborhood coordination officers, working hand in hand with you and with the steady sector officers assigned to your neighborhoods. Please get to know them, get to know their supervisors, and let them know what's going on in your neighborhood. They want to partner with you to identify problems and to develop solutions, because I tell people all the time, public safety is a shared responsibility. It requires all of us to take ownership and to keep an eye out in the communities where we live, where we work, and where we worship. And no one knows those blocks better than you do. So we rely on you to let us know when something doesn't look right. It also requires us, the police department, to be flexible enough to direct our resources where they're needed most. To that end, over the next few weeks, you will see more of our cops near synagogues and Jewish cultural centers, and there may be many other members of the department that you won't see, plainclothes officers or intelligence analysts who will also be working on your behalf. We have to be adaptable with who, where, and why we deploy, because the threats we face are constantly changing. because the NYPD is committed to meeting every challenge. And with the support of the people we serve, we will maintain New York City's standing as the safest large city in America. We have a great program for you this morning. But before I turn it over to our speakers, I'd like to thank Ambassador Diane for once again joining us at One Police Plaza, and all the clergy liaisons who are here. More than 1/3 of our 250 or so clergy liaisons are Jewish, and each of you enables the NYPD and the Jewish community to share information seamlessly. Make it easier for our non-Jewish officers in your neighborhoods to better understand the communities they protect, and that makes everyone in the community and in the police department safer. As I said, our job is to make you safe, and more importantly, to feel safe. Thanks again for being here, and may you and all of your loved ones have a happy Passover. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Commissioner O'Neill. I'd now like to introduce the Consul General for Israel here in New York, Ambassador Danny Dayan.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, friends. At this stage, I am supposed to recognize the many dignitaries that are here, the Commissioner, the high-ranking police officers, the rabbis, and the community leaders. But I want to recognize instead one person, a member of the NYPD. I want to recognize my friend, Detective Mohammed Amin. The community affairs liaison to our consulate, with whom we and I personally developed not just a working relationship, but also a deep personal friendship. Every Ramadan, Mohammed and other Muslim members of the force break one day the fast in my residence after praying in my study in my residence. And he always welcomes me in Hebrew with the hearty Shalom Aleichem, and I respond with Salam Aleikum wa Rahmatullah. And that can happen only in New York. And that can happen only in the NYPD. Because, Commissioner, that is the spirit of collaboration, of friendship, of fraternity between different, sometimes opposing groups that you have educated this force to work with. Muhammad is an Egyptian American, and Passover is about Egypt, about our exodus from Egypt, about the liberation from Egypt, our emancipation. Actually, Passover is about so many values of justice, freedom, emancipation, and looking relentlessly after the dream that it really is a New York festival, Pesach. It's so imbued with the values that New York irradiates that the similarity of New York and the Pesach values and New York values are striking. On my way here, I received one of the most emotive and touching news that an Israeli envoy in New York can ever receive. In 1982, 37 years ago, in a very difficult battle in Lebanon, in the town of near the town of Sultan Yaqub, many Israeli soldiers fell in that battle. 3 of them remained missing in action. One of them was a Brooklyn boy, Zachariah Zachary Baumel. Since 1982, for 37 years, the entire Jewish people yearned for know what the fate of Zachariah and his friends was. And today we were informed that 37 years after that battle, Zachary Baumel, the boy that was born in Brooklyn, New York, and came to defend the Jewish people in the state of Israel, his body was recovered and will be brought to burial, proper burial in the land of Israel. I say this not only because I'm deeply touched yet still by the news that I received literally on my way here, and because Zachariah was from Brooklyn and then from Jerusalem, but also because that encapsulates what I would call the Israeli spirit, and there are persons that heard me in my home talking about it the other day, that we never forget our boys, we never forget those that give the utmost sacrifice for the state of Israel and the Jewish people. And my friends, we are in days in which, as you know, and as we heard from Rabbi Kass and from Commissioner O'Neill, the ugly head of anti-Semitism is raising again. And I don't want to be alarmist, because we are not, definitely we are not in Germany of the 30s. If you ask me what is the biggest difference between America or Europe of today and Germany of the 30s, is not only in the magnitude of the events. I think the most important difference is you. Because in Kristallnacht in Germany, or in the pogroms in Europe, in Ukraine or in Russia or in other places, the government, the authority, the law enforcement agencies were with the thugs, were with the attackers. And the people, the society as a whole, was with the thugs, was with the attackers. That's the reason that when I see an anti-Semitic event here, I am so touched and so encouraged by the reaction of the civil society, by the reaction of the district attorneys, and by the reaction of the New York Police Department. That makes the whole difference. You stand with us, with the Jewish community, shoulder to shoulder, to defeat the attackers, to defeat the bigots, to defeat the anti-Semites, and defeat them we will. Nevertheless, we have to be clear about anti-Semitism. Because even if that huge difference between the anti-Semitism in Europe in those dark days of humanity, probably the darkest day humanity knew, and this country today, even if the reaction is completely diametrically opposed, we have to learn from history. Anti-Semitism is a scourge that has to be defeated in the moment it raises its ugly head. We cannot let anti-Semitism develop into the huge beast that it became in Europe in the 30s. This is the time, not tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow. This is the time to combat anti-Semitism until we erase its ugly head from the face of earth. And we have to be clear about what anti-Semitism is. Anti-Semitism, yes, is that naked, bare-knuckled bigotry with the Nazi flag or white supremacism, its slogans that attacks Jews, like in Charlottesville or in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I would just say that next time when this Passover is not like any other, because this Passover and the next high holidays in the Hebrew month of Tishrei will be after Pittsburgh. And Jewish life in this country before Pittsburgh and after Pittsburgh are two different stories. We have to be much more decisive, we have to be much more clear, we have to be much more determined not to interrupt Jewish life in this country. But anti-Semitism is not only that we saw in Pittsburgh or in Charlottesville. Anti-Semitism sometimes disguises itself as hatred of the State of Israel, but make no mistake, it's the same goal, it's the same aim, hatred towards the Jewish people. And we saw that even in this city, when a sukkah was desecrated, the last festival of Sukkot, with supposedly anti-Israeli slogans, but that shows, exemplifies that the anti-Semitism and the supposedly anti-Zionism are two faces of the same ugly coin. And we have to understand that in order to combat it properly. The negation, the denial of the connection of the Jewish people to its homeland, the denial of Jewish history of 3,000 and 4,000 years is no less anti-Semitic than the denial of the Holocaust. Both are representations, demonstrations of a deep anti-Semitic sentiment. My friends, as far as we are concerned, we know that in this city we have solid ground to rely on. The State of Israel obviously does not have authority to act outside the boundaries of the State of Israel. But make no mistake, an anti-Semitic act, whether it happens in New York, in Pittsburgh, in Paris, in Warsaw, or in Moscow, or in Buenos Aires, is for us Israelis domestic news, is for us Israeli local news. We don't have authority, but the State of Israel was created to have responsibility. And we will stand for that responsibility. We will do our duty in order to prevent anti-Semitism all over the world. There are places in which we have to find innovative ways in order to do that. Thank God, and thank you, Commissioner, that in New York City we simply have a police department, a police force, a law enforcement agencies, DAs, and a civil society that we can rely on and we know perfectly that they will do their utmost in order to combat and ultimately to defeat the scourge of anti-Semitism. That's the reason that I came here, not to raise awareness. To raise awareness to this audience is preaching to the choir. I came here to say that I know that we are together in the battle against anti-Semitism and against bigotry in all its forms. I came here to express my deepest gratitude to the New York Police Department, to its commissioner, to its chiefs, to its detectives, to its officers, to the law enforcement agencies, the district attorney of Brooklyn, in which many of the anti-Semitic attacks have occurred, and the other districts, the other counties. We know perfectly that we are not just allies, we are completely in the same line in order to defeat anti-Semitism. For that, I wish to thank two simple Hebrew words, תודה רבה.
We've been listening to Police Commissioner James O'Neill and other community leaders in the Jewish community discuss security over Passover celebrations in the city. The commissioner pointed out that the spike in hate crimes and anti-Semitic crimes citywide in the past 3 months, but says it is time for vigilance, not fear. Commissioner O'Neill says that the NYPD relies on the community to be open in communication and let them know when something is wrong. He says they will have more officers as well as plainclothes officers around synagogues in the area during the holiday.